Well, things sure are about to be real steamy today, and it's definitely not the kind you think it's about to go on, I'll tell you that for free, but hey, there gotta be some ways to ring in the new year, and mine happens to be this. So much like Bayonetta 1, you best believe that I had plans to revisit Bayonetta 2 as well in efforts to reach the fabled third game that is now in store shelves across the frickin' world now. Thanks for that, Helena Taylor. Appreciate the service you put for this game's marketing back in October. However, for some added context about this review specifically, I gotta be honest here, but this video was originally planned for early December for the holiday season and cheer, but like all things in life, things just happen to be in your way regardless of how much you want to say, but I'm the captain now.
Man, it's like that one time I stepped on a cactus.
For some reason, because why the hell not, I had to replace microphones during that time, where recording the voice lines for this video was supposed to be done in late October so that this video would release in late November the earliest, or like I already mentioned, early December as a sort of a birthday courtesy present for me. And as soon as that was fixed with a new microphone that I'm just loving so damn hard right now, things got in the way because of Sonic Frontiers and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet releasing on me and suddenly having to take in those games a top priority for a good chunk or so, which now after a full-blown month and a half, ladies and gentlemen, brings us here now as we are close in the early weeks of January, and finally I'm able to talk about a Bayonetta game that was made almost 9 years ago.
The hubris in me is strong with this one. Well, let's just see what the script had initially planned for me to say about this game, and we'll just move on from there.
Now, seeing that we are talking about Bayonetta again, I think it's best to say that for those that know me, understand full well that when it comes to video game genres, it would not be a hell of a shocker to hear me say that hack and slash games are simply the best there is in terms of having an action-paced gameplay style. That and action RPGs by extension. I mean, take a good look at the past few Square Enix titles and how they've been gameplay-wise. These guys are nothing but inspired by the hack and slash gameplay mechanics.
Well, I mean, someone had to point it out.
I mean, what can I say? Hack and slash games just work best in orienting that action and presenting that arcade-like gameplay quality that most games nowadays like to deviate from. And the combat in these games are built to provide a sense of kinetic energy that often stays constant the more combos and moves you end up pulling off. The platforming in certain sections allows for basic exploration and hidden gems to collect along the way, and the story in some cases are like an anime-like sense with its wacky characterization of characters, and overall these games just reek of a level of both edginess and badass energy that honestly no game I've seen to date has been able to replicate well. Okay, maybe except Devil May Cry, this game practically gave birth to the whole genre.
And we're not arguing for anything else.
With this in mind, it would have made so much sense for me that after experiencing the innovation and excitement that Bayonetta 1 brought to the table in 2009, that I would be immediately diving into its sequel, Bayonetta 2 on the Nintendo Switch, thanks to that sweet ass dual release pack baby that was announced and released in 2018. Oh, and also experience the Devil May Cry games too, since I did mention that franchise already, which that reminds me.
Now, back during my Bayonetta 1 revisit, I did say that Bayonetta 1 was my introduction to the hack and slash genre, but that was half true. In actuality, I started my hack and slash journey playing this bad boy right here back in 2016, and well shit, I sure started off on a low bar, didn't I?
As much as I do want to talk about how ridiculous of a game DMC Devil May Cry was at the end of the day, that's not what I'm here for, alright? Like, that's gonna be for another time, for another day in the world of my own sanity, I guess. What we're really here for is Mama Bayonetta once again as she presents another action-paced adventure that would not only improve quality-wise from the first game, but also be attributed as an exclusive third-party title at that, releasing on one of the 8th generation consoles that we all know and love today and have appreciated during its course, known as the Nintendo Wii U. Wait, what?
Wait, did I read that right? Oh, it looks like I did.
So yeah, the Wii U of all places was home for Bayonetta 2, and how such an anticipated sequel ended up releasing in what is arguably the worst era of Nintendo's modern history is something that a lot of fans today kinda don't understand. Luckily, as someone with a rising bachelor's degree in history, we can fix that problem no sweat and head our merry asses all the way to 2012 to 2014 to explain why the most overly sexualized character of all current gaming ended up settling for the Mario Man himself. After the Wii's launch and comfortable success in the previous era, Nintendo was beginning to not pay too much attention to the console wars, seeing that they weren't too focused on providing horsepower, more so than they were on putting their car on cruise control, and figured that hey, if it worked for the Wii back then it should work on the Wii U on launch too, right?
And we all know how that turned out.
But alongside that usual first party support mentality and less drive to consider a higher technology to be top priority that we come to expect from Nintendo in every single generation, the Wii U shockingly happened to be the era where Nintendo just kinda threw a left freaking curveball at us out of nowhere. Not only was it the era where the Wii U was promoting new ways to play your favorite titles thanks to the touchpad controls and remote-like play, but it was also the same time where Nintendo was somehow pressuring for more third-party support than ever before, which arguably was for the interest of keeping that console alive, especially with a seismic toss of a nightmare that was a year of Luigi. Man, you guys remember that year? Because Nintendo sure as hell won't. These third-party titles would sprout everywhere during the course of the Wii U's 5-year run that would somehow make fans go absolutely ballistic, with titles such as the Arkham series appearing out of nowhere with Batman Arkham Origins, ports of games that would normally be on the Xbox and PlayStation, such as the Assassin's Creed franchise or Deus Ex Machina, or hell, even reviving older IPs such as Rayman with Rayman Legends. The Wii U was honestly home for so many third-party titles that you wouldn't be surprised that Bayonetta would somehow get involved with whatever the hell Nintendo was cooking at the time. Which sure as hell came at a cost and some performance anxiety on Platinum Games' part, I'll tell you that. The reason I say this is because during this time while the Wii U was keeping score on itself, somehow there was pressure building up for Platinum Games in terms of delivering another successful IP. Sure, there was the success of Bayonetta 1 as well as Metal Gear Rising releasing in 2011 for the previous generation. It seemed that somehow for Hideki Kamiya's ability to request for a Bayonetta sequel just wasn't something in Sega's radar at that point, and it was mainly due to it losing its interest on the IP as a whole. Sega was probably at the time going like, hey, let's give Sonic the Hedgehog another go and see what he can do on the Nintendo Wii U, given a Sonic Lost World in 2013, and since then I haven't emotionally nor financially recovered. Thankfully, faith was restored onto the Bayonetta IP thanks to the efforts of Nintendo publishing Platinum Games' Wonderful 101 for the Wii U in 2013, a title that for one is very reminiscent of an early work of Kamiya's Capcom days known as Beautiful Joe, a series I do have plans to tackle somewhere down the line along with the rest of whatever my backlog is at this point, but just wanted to throw that detail out there. Now I can't say much about Wonderful 101 as a whole, but this game does get brought up in the conversation of Bayonetta 2's development, and for a very good reason. It was because of this game in particular that Nintendo began to finance the Bayonetta IP by co-owning it with Sega, in efforts to at least keep the prospects of that delicious ass sequel going. And soon after, at the very same E3 conference in 2013, where Sony and Microsoft were announcing their latest gaming artillery, Bayonetta 2 finally became a reality and was teased for a 2014 release window on the Nintendo Wii U, along with a bundle pack that included the first game as well, since Nintendo and Sega knew full well that many people wouldn't be aware as to who the hell Bayonetta was, and they felt like there was something more to look forward to alongside this new up-and-coming Wii U exclusive. But this is honestly as far as I can talk about the Wii U experience of Bayonetta 2, since in case I didn't mention it already, I played my first time with the Nintendo Switch port almost 2 years ago. But that didn't mean that I wasn't aware of Bayonetta's presence back then as a 14-year-old kid. I think I can say that by this point in my life as a teenager, I for sure annoyed the hell out of my parents on wanting to give me a Wii U for my birthday, seeing how much I was so excited on its launch back in 2011. But then after the millionth no, I just didn't bother to care for it, nor even bother to take a look at my Wii games to play around for who knows how many times at that point. Hell, I think it was here where 2013-2014 YouTube was like the ultimate pastime for me instead of gaming, and I think this is where I saw Markiplier at his prime, the Game Grumps, and Tetra Ninja specifically, where eventually I came to know more about Bayonetta as a character. That or it was definitely because of that one thumbnail that was being thrown around that I can't show you nowadays because YouTube is not the same as it once was.
It was the one with Bayonetta had that massive cake of a thumbnail. You know the one I'm talking about, and no, I'm not gonna elaborate any further.
I saw her face all over my YouTube feed, and also that cake, and it wasn't until seeing her debut in Smash 4 as the final DLC fighter later on that it just sealed the deal for me in terms of wanting to know who this character was. Like, who exactly was this Bayonetta, and what purpose did she have being in a game with Sonic, Mario, Link, Mega Man, and Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy freaking 7?
And that's where we come to the present here, so get ready to witness the peak madness that is none other than Bayonetta 2 here, because my sanity is surely being tested on this one.
Oh look, if it isn't another prologue detailing some important plot details that will be explained later on in the story, much like the first game did. Woo-wee! Wait, are those freaking mechs? Damn, Umbran witches go hard. The story of Bayonetta 2 is rather simple, and it kicks us off with Bayonetta out shopping with Enzo, only to then result in an airplane fight against angels, gets her best friend taken away from her, as like Nintendo likes to put it, as she gets sent to hell, and is off on a mission to retrieve her bestie before time runs out, setting our sights out on a city called Noiden and a mountain called Fibblebenter, where hell and heaven's doorways are located and connected, kicking us off with one hell of a bang unlike the first game.
Damn, all this happened during the holiday season too.
Of course, this is just a generalized plot summary of Bayonetta 2 that I just wanted to at least provide before really diving deep into the lore this game actually presents in the Bayonetta universe. And trust me when I say that the lore is deep with this one, with some minor flaws in how it was introduced. Unlike the first game, there is some major emphasis to the world building with its locales and presentation that personally makes Bayonetta 2 the more well-rounded game from the entire trilogy, making it a game to be easily picked up without necessarily relying on having to play the first game to know more or less those important plot details and characters, since most of the time it will be introduced to you in this game as if it was new information. A good example of this is how, despite being returning characters, Enzo, John, Radon, and Luca all seem to have a more refreshing attitude towards them that brings about that sense of understanding their personalities that both newcomers and old-timers would end up appreciating. It certainly helps that Bayonetta 2 did came packaged with Bayonetta 1 for those that did want to try the previous game out, but as the story of this game venture onwards, it's more of a secondary treat to indulge in rather than an actual requirement to understand what the hell is really going on in Bayonetta. Oh, Luca and John in this game are some of my favorite moments here because of their highly exaggerated personalities being interwoven within the plot. It's definitely fun to see Luca be up to Bayonetta's antics as per usual, but now it's more of a cordial manner as opposed to the first game where he was just so annoyed by her at every given second. He doesn't show up as much as before, but when he does, it's always to help at the most opportune time, be it to warn Bayonetta about the impending danger that lies ahead, telling us about the legend of Aesir that affects the plot, and literally helping to stop Armageddon by helping with an Uno reverse trick that I wish I was exaggerating, but goddamn, we're talking about the Bayonetta franchise here, so I'm really not. Damn, who knew that Uno goes hard in the Bayonetta universe? And John continues to steal the show for me from start to finish in this game, and while yes, she is a damsel in distress for this one, she does make up for it a lot towards the end of the game, as she shows up out of nowhere with a freaking jet to pick up Bayonetta like it's some kind of a regular carpool to the soccer moms meetup at the local park. Plus, you can't deny that her design in this game is absolutely amazing and iconic, and I love the longer hair and biker outfit for her as opposed to whatever it is she had in the first game. Of course, like any addition to a game, you do got newcomers joining in on the action as well, one being Loki, a mysterious boy who has the ability to manipulate time and space somehow, given that he can transport Bayonetta to Paradiso and Inferno like it's some kind of cakewalk. Meanwhile, we're out here playing the entire game like, well then what the hell's the point of climbing the mountain then? Now, he serves as the little one of this game, the Cereza of this adventure so to speak, as often Bayonetta takes care of him, more so than he takes care of her, but unlike Cereza in the first game, I find this antics to be more enjoyable and definitely less annoying from a gameplay story progression, but that's honestly about it with him. He's a very one-sided character with a typical hot-headed shonen protagonist personality, with a design that makes him look like he just shot out of an Urban Outfitters with how utterly ridiculous he looks. Wait, is he wearing the Millennium Puzzle?
Whoa. So anyways,
Loki is one side of a coin, however, as he also got Loftyr to deal with the story as well, the quote-unquote brother of Loki, as he aims to track him down and bring him to custody as a means to awaken the eyes of the world and summon Aesir, the so-called original creator of not just the world, but also of heaven and hell, and is said to have distributed the eyes as a means to give humanity free will. Or something along those lines, man. Look, I don't know. As a means to obtain the power of Aesir, Loftyr also decided to manipulate time and space by bringing a younger version of Baldur from the witch hunts to the present day, as a means to obtain the right eye while he ensures he gets Bayonetta to bring him the left eye of the world, which, knowing the events of the previous game, doesn't really work out well for Aesir in the end, as he gets his ass handed to him by the International Space Station. Wait, what? But with the help of a lovely dropkick from Baldur and Bayonetta doing a nice Sweet 16 dance recital, he is sent flying to the stratosphere like Jubileus did in the first game, and you would assume the day was saved here, but it turns out that only his physical body was gone as Aesir's spirit still remains. And as a final act of desperation, young Baldur seals himself inside his body before he ultimately gets sent back to his timeline and cause the events of Bayonetta 1 to occur. Look, this is where I can argue that the storyline of Bayonetta as a whole ends up getting pretty convoluted. If it's because of that mindset that they wanted everything to feel fresh for those playing their first time with the Bayonetta franchise, then yes, I totally understand that, but it doesn't feel as rewarding as the first game when it comes down to understanding its premise, especially when you remember that both of these games ended up releasing as a bundle pack. You're all over the place in Bayonetta 2, with locales such as the city of Naughton in the first few chapters, exploring the coastal city inside and out, then down in the depths of the mountains to enter Inferno, where you're there for a solid 3 chapters with little to properly set your foot in, to now time traveling in the 17th century, fighting in the witch hunts with Rosa, your mom, and then seeing mechs in said timeline for another 3 chapters, and all this non-stop action go makes you suddenly question if really the events of the first game ended up happening. Everything is just suddenly happening all at once, and you're just there sitting like, well, that just happened. And truth be told, I don't remember being this rushed to get to one location in the first game, as I felt that in Bayonetta 1, things in terms of its story and premise felt very well paced, and when the action needed to pick itself back up, it picked itself back up without so much needing to rush the player and expect to suddenly take things in and say, hey, this is a Bayonetta game, so you better pay attention. But at least to rectify this a little bit, they did manage to tie everything back to square one with young Baldur towards the end of the game, and I guess it was a nice solid resolution to help explain the events of Bayonetta 1 happening in the first place, but even then it just leaves you with this idea that the writers for this game in particular just didn't want this game to make any sense continuity wise, or they absolutely knew what they were doing and they just preferred to end up being like Charlie from It's Always Sunny from Philadelphia. Let me put it this way, the story of Bayonetta 2 just exists, and it's one that I don't think you should be paying too much attention to unless you really were nitpicking on certain details for Bayonetta 3 theory crafting at the time, or this was really your first time playing the franchise. Bayonetta 2 at the end of the day does what it needs to do, and it moves on and delivers in that manner much like it did in the first game, along with some fine tuning in its gameplay, combat, and of course its characterizations. Admittedly, I like that they characterized Bayonetta to be a lot more vulnerable for this game when compared to the first one. Yeah, in Bayonetta 1, she was cool, calm, and collective, and of course in your face with the amount of sexual undertones she had going for you, but here in Bayonetta 2, she seemed a little bit more refined, more ladylike as opposed to being more of a dominatrix, where she just downright toys with you and belittles her opponent at any given moment and just does it in the most step on me mommy fetish way possible. Man, that's a phrase that's gonna haunt me for the rest of days. That sexual attitude is still there, don't get me wrong, but I think they wanted to make the character feel somewhat tame in terms of her personality to again entice those newcomers who didn't want to play the first game right out the gate. This is fine personally, since at the end of the day, Bayonetta still talks the talk and walks the walk like before, and her character design in this one delivers on who she really is at the end of the day. Plus, her climaxes in this one really like to hit home with the idea of you thinking that Nintendo was always family friendly, but nah man, they knew full well that they were in on that good ass action that Bayonetta really is known for.
Man, the Wii U really was a version killer the more you look back on it.
But much like the first game, Bayonetta 2 is all about that non-stop hack and slash gameplay action, and with this transition of one generation of consoles to another, I will say that Platinum Games absolutely had an understanding of what they wanted Bayonetta to be and executed that to the best of their abilities. To kind of throw out the whole oh but it's a Wii U title argument out the window for a second here, you can tell that there was a massive graphical upgrade for this title, and Platinum Games was really hammering on the idea of making the sequel not just a second title to the Bayonetta franchise, but one that had to go bigger in its overall scale, resulting in what I think is a really solid Bayonetta experience. Notwithstanding the fact that we still have Bayonetta 3 to cover, and that thought alone is really testing my patience. Bayonetta 2 absolutely dominates in presentation, that from the way it handles boss fights to such a grand scale, with the high octane action really setting itself in from time to time in certain sections. The game just has this overall feel of bringing more of what Bayonetta offered from the previous game and just amplifying it in the best ways possible, making this sequel stand out by a mile when compared to the first game, and by extension the third game too. The combat is smooth and focuses a lot on trying to appear stylish whilst also dealing as much damage as possible, resulting in what I can only describe as a Kingdom Hearts 2 floatiness. The feel to Bayonetta here when dealing combos is lighter, and this reflects a lot on what her techniques and new weapons have to offer this go around as well. It certainly makes things easier to dodge and just feel more alive as opposed to the first game's combat, where it was more grounded and kinda tight in some instances, where some people sort of enjoyed that, but I much prefer the way they handle combat here. Sadly, unlike the first game though, during my run for this review, I did not get all the LPs that would get me more weapons to utilize, and quite frankly, I think that was for the better because knowing my dumbass and how I like to play hack and slash games, I only use about 2 or 3 weapons for the entire game and I don't even do much in terms of combo structure and diversity. Besides that, you still got the standard torture attacks and witch time like before, and in addition to that, Bayonetta 2 also introduces the Umbran climaxes as a proper mechanic this time instead of just being a one-off boss fight thing from the previous game. These makes attacks larger in scale and really packing some heavy duty damage to boot, while as a bonus regenerate your health that you may have lost, which certainly helps a lot if things get a little difficult for you towards the course of the game. It also helps to pack some extra punch in the amount of hand throwing you're already making, and again this makes Bayonetta 2's combat visually stunning. But this shit also comes at a massive cost. Umbran climaxes, while great as a mechanic, seem to be the major focus as opposed to trying to balance things out. You got the torture attacks returning of course, and witch time as the dodge mechanic, but they are greatly nerfed in this game as they don't have that satisfactory oomph despite appearing a whole lot more detailed. They pull their punches here and it can be somewhat off-putting since what's the whole ass point of even using a torture attack when you could just summon that hand of frickin' god by pressing the L button. It doesn't feel right, and while it looks appealing combo wise, it's not well thought out as you'd be relying on this mechanic as the game progresses due to its difficulty curve, and because of how obnoxious it is, you'll have tremendous muscle memory in activating the stupid thing instead of utilizing a torture attack, which overall does more damage. And trust me, that difficulty curve, while isn't as dramatic as Bayonetta 1's, it's still gonna cause a massive whiplash when you're not paying attention. The additional gameplay styles are present here like last time, with a horse riding segment in Inferno, a John Jet sequence that is similar to that of Bayonetta 1's Rocket Joyride to Isla del Sol, a mech segment during the Vigrid portion of the game to deal heavy duty damage, and flying segments and boss fights to really add that sense of spectacle and grandeur that Platinum Games was presenting. These additional segments I enjoyed a lot in terms of visuals and served towards making Bayonetta 2 a more flavorful sense in its combat and gameplay. Those mechs in particular, while something out of left field story-wise, really was something neat for a good chapter because they weren't as heavy as I thought they would be, and they were a really nice diversion from the usual Bayonetta gameplay style. Plus, I feel after developing Wonderful 101 and Metal Gear Rising that Platinum Games were secretly liking mechs or kaijus. I don't know, I can't tell you that much. Definitely something to talk about when we get to Bayonetta 3 I suppose, since I find that way more relevant there. But that's more or less how I feel about the gameplay for this one, especially since I find Bayonetta 2's combat to be more enjoyable than Bayonetta 1's. Yeah, it could be thanks to that aesthetic of the game, as Bayonetta 2 does look a lot less muted in color tone. It doesn't feel like it's coated in a frickin' sepia filter when it came down to handling its cutscenes, which man, that was certainly something in the first game, wasn't it? Things feel more vibrant and dynamic here, allowing the game to actually give you a better understanding of what you're experiencing, which I find it to be helpful since it doesn't make this game scream like it's a game of its time, unlike Bayonetta 1, where you see this game reeks of that late 2000s vibes. The combo system in this game sure has its flaws, but it still delivers in giving a good time for players that are known to handle the hack and slash action elements, and for newcomers starting out with this one, something to engage with more besides the standard first party titles that you would expect to have on a Nintendo console like a Mario or a Zelda game. And to speak more on that note of aesthetics, the costumes that Bayonetta gets to don in this game are simply off the charts, be it Nintendo or otherwise. Instead of essences, we have the super mirrors making their debut, and depending on which one you purchase, you can have Bayonetta wear outfits such as a dress, a schoolgirl outfit apparently, or if you're really feeling naughty, a policewoman outfit that just
I'll be right back.
Seeing this is also co-owned by Nintendo and released for the Wii U, you do have the Link, Samus, Peach, and Daisy costumes returning, but also a Star Fox one joining in on some of that Bayonetta action. These can be unlocked with the amiibos you collect for each respective character, and seeing that I've only bared witness to 2 amiibos here, well, you can tell that I didn't bother to highlight this time around because I definitely do not have the funds to go on amiibo hunting just to prove this damn point. I will say though that the inclusion of Star Fox does have a little bit of history, as thanks to this and the John Jet sequence later in the game helped Nintendo greenlit a Star Fox Wii U game that Platinum would develop that ended up being Star Fox Zero, a game I've heard about that looks interesting to play, I'll be honest, but that would be when I decide to cover the Star Fox series. Who knows when. All in all, Bayonetta 2 is quite the experience that I think is the best one to start out with if you are new to the Bayonetta franchise personally. I mean, it's iconic for one thing, as this design of Bayonetta would be the definitive design that many will know her as even today, and while I did say that Bayonetta 1 is a timeless classic, I also feel like Bayonetta 2 retained a better quality in the long run. It definitely has the better graphics of the two, albeit some subtle details here and there. The combat is still fine despite being somewhat lesser, and the story, despite being extremely convoluted like the first game, still enables first-comers to not feel lost in what this franchise offers, and whether that's because of Nintendo helping out in the end, or Platinum Games learning from their mistakes with the previous game, I honestly cannot tell you. What I can tell you though is that Bayonetta 2 is indeed a smashing Platinum sequel, one that still delivers on what Bayonetta 1 promised and executed while making things new and unique for players to experience along the way. It seals the deal in reminding players that played the first game that Bayonetta is back for another sexy and crafty adventure, and for new players to witness the glory that makes Bayonetta stand out as both a character and a franchise.
And with that, we can now come to a close with Bayonetta 2, and while it's the last time, man, the last time I played this game was like 2 years ago, and while that isn't a big deal for many people, it actually is for me, since it was around that time that I started making content as well. So covering this game again really felt like a nostalgic moment for me, and you know, I can save more or less my sentiments and all that BS later on a future video or whatever, because now it's time to come to a close here. I kind of said everything I needed to say about Bayonetta 2, so thank you all so much for watching, thank you all for supporting the channel, love you all to 120, stay safe and sexy as always, be awesome, peace out, and take care. Actually, hang on a second, because there's one more thing I need to do before we can finally close this chapter for good. About damn time!